This one will cost you $175 plus. These are available for just $70. Is there that much of a difference? Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So today I wanted to ask and try to answer a very simple question. This is Maker's Mark Cellar Aged 2025. When I reviewed it, I gave it a very positive review. It did pretty well in my blind matchup of all the Cellar Aged releases so far. But these two, the Keeper's release and the Heart release, are two previous releases from makers that I also have, and they were available, or I got them for somewhere in the $65 to $70 range. The question I want to ask and try to answer is the Maker's Mark Cellar Aged really that much better? Is it really almost triple as good? So we're going to put these three head to head in a blind matchup. I figured this would be helpful to you guys and helpful to me. You know, we can always compare the Cellar Aged to other Cellar Aged products, but I think it's also a lot of fun and more informative to compare it to other releases from the same distillery and see if these price tiers and value ratios are actually matching up. Just for a little bit more context, the Maker's Mark Cellar Aged, again, is available for around $175 MSRP. It's a blend of mostly 11, but also 13 and 14-year-old whiskeys. It's one of the most exclusive, probably actually the most exclusive thing Maker's Mark does. The Keepers and Heart release are part of their wood finishing series. This is the second chapter. Both of them are part of it. The Heart release came out in 2024. The Keepers was in 2025. They tend to use the staves to finish some of these, give it a slightly different flavor profile. For each of these, they'll let you know kind of some tasting notes, and they do all come in at cask strength. So we're talking about somewhere in the 109 to 115 proof point range here. Actually, let's see what the Cellar Aged is in terms of proof. 112.9. So these are all very fair there. What we're really gonna try to evaluate and get down to is how much better, if at all, is the Cellar Aged? Does it justify its price versus these far more available and cheaper options? So without further ado, let me get these bottles off the table. We'll set up the full blind, and then I'll let you guys go along the journey with me of discovering which one's the best here. Okay. We're officially set up now. We've got the whole blind before us. I don't know the order at all. Of course, I know what's in the blind, so it's not a double blind, but we should be able to dive in here without knowing much. Good thing is Maker's Mark uses the same mash bill as well across all their products, so hopefully these taste somewhat similar, and it is a fun experience to dive in and pick out the differences. We'll start over here on my right, your left. We'll call this glass A, and we'll dive in on the nose. Smells nice. Maple syrup, first note I got. So plenty of brown sugar, a little bit of oak. Touch of chocolate. A little bit of a red fruit too, like a cherry. Yeah, chocolate covered cherry is in there as well. I think the biggest note though is that maple syrup feel. Maybe a touch of ethanol. It doesn't have a huge amount of depth, but it does have really nice, potent, sweet flavors. All right, let's go into glass B, our middle glass on the nose. There's a creamy richness, oiliness to this nose. More like a vanilla, plum, darker fruit thing going on. Still some chocolate, but it feels richer. It feels like a fudge note. A little bit earthy along with that. Dense. That's what the word I was looking for. It just feels denser than Glass A. Very, very good. I'd say I think I'm leaning toward Glass B there just because it is dense, but Glass A might have the just stronger, like sweet, pleasant note to it. All right, let's go into our final glass here on the nose, glass C. This might actually end up being the brightest of the noses. Vanilla, bright red cherry, even I could argue like a strawberry. Sugary for sure. A little bit like a strawberry jam. Again, compared to glass B, this feels like it might be lacking a little depth. Doesn't feel as dense, but it's got beautiful bright notes. Touch of honey. It feels more related to glass A for sure. Right now I will say glass B is standing out as the denser nose, but I really like the pleasantness and the just sweetness factor of glass A and C. All right, the nose is one thing, the palate is something completely different where we'll get a lot more information. So let's go into glass A on the palate. Cheers. Well, by golly, that's good. All of that maple syrup and brown sugar comes through on the palate. It's a little spicier than I thought it was going to be. It's a little bit more like a cinnamon or baking spice mixed in. Barrel spice, a touch of that as well. But it just leans heavy into that maple syrup, brown sugar sweetness. Not as much of the fruit on the palate, maybe like a apple, a little bit of caramel apple kind of going on, but it's leaning mostly into that brown sugar, maple syrup feel. A little bit of oak, but it's a lighter, gentler oak. The spice is what gives it some staying power. It's very, very good, but not the most complex whiskey. Let's get some water and we'll go into glass B. Moving right along to glass B on the palate. See if this denser nose translates. Cheers. Yeah. Yep. The density did translate. The mouthfeel is stronger, more oily. The flavor comes more in waves. It stays pretty centered on this cherry, almost like cherry jam, cherry cordial, and fudge richness. That's right at the core. There's an oakiness to it that's a little darker. A little bit of that earthiness kind of sticks to the palate and stays around with that fudge note. Even something like a coffee bean, maybe some tobacco. Feels richer and denser through and through. And my experience of sipping it was like a burst of flavor and then another wave and then another wave, and it kind of sticks around. So while the flavors I wouldn't say are spectacularly above glass A, I feel like the overall experience is elevated. Let's go into our final glass though. I'll get some water and then we'll dive in. So, glass C to round us out. Probably the brightest nose. See how it translates. Cheers. That one is interesting. There's like a funkier oak. There's a little bit of that earthy quality of the fudge from glass B, but it's a little bit brighter. Some honey, like raw honey mixed in here. A little bit of toasty, marshmallow kind of vibe. And nice brown sugar, kind of sharing that with all three. Glass A, again, and glass C feel similar. But that funky oak note was a little bit, not off-putting, but it took me aback. With a brighter, sweeter nose, it felt like it had a little bit denser and even earthier mouthfeel than I was certainly expecting, but also I was like a little bit thrown off as the sip kind of went on. Not a bad thing, just intriguing. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is go back in reverse order and then do some A/B testing, really get down to the final kind of details here. I'm gonna fast forward through all that so this video isn't an eternity for you guys, and we'll just cut right to when I'm making my decision and coming up with my order. Let's do it. All right, everybody. That took a little while. It's definitely a pretty close race among these three. None of them are bad. In fact, all of them are very good. I do have a clear front runner, and I'm not sure if it's the cellar aged or not. As I've gone through this, I've kind of gotten back and forth on that, and so that tells you anything. There's a little bit of doubt here. But I have a pretty clear, definitive order for myself. It's sort of evident from the beginning what I was leaning towards as my winner, but let's go through it all. So in third place for me is going to be Glass A. I did like the just like brute sweetness of this guy, but it ended up being the least complex and least interesting throughout the sipping experience. I felt like the other two were elevated above it, but this was still delivering great flavor. Let's see what it was. Okay. That's the heart release. If you'd asked me going into it which of these was my least favorite, I probably would have said this. It's really good stuff. It's got, they say caramel, chocolate, maple. I think that maple syrup thing really comes through. It's just a more limited presentation of whiskey overall, but still very sweet and very pleasant and very good. Then it came down to these other two. And I really like both. They both had an earthy quality that came through, a bit more like of a fudge note. But to be honest with you, I just, from the start, really thought the winner and the clear sort of front runner here was Glass B. So that's going to be our winner today. Glass C is going to come in second place. Let's see what the winner was, because that will reveal what second place was. I suspected it might be this way. The Keeper's Release is winning today, and Cellar Aged comes in second. Wow. As soon as I smelled it, I thought this was the Cellar Aged. I thought the density of sweetness had to be from something older. And then I tasted the third glass here, and I was surprised by the density on the palate and the earthiness, but it didn't live up even to the Keeper's Release for me today. The Keeper's Release was just brute force sweetness like Glass A, but then more depth and richness, and it came in waves over my palate, versus the Cellar Aged even felt a little bit lackluster compared to that. Not that it's not good whiskey, it's very good whiskey. Maybe it's the more complex, takes a little bit longer to appreciate. But man, the Keeper's Release, I'm actually kind of happy, because I've been singing the praises of the Keeper's Release this year and really telling people, I don't know why you're letting this sit on the shelves for $68 in most places. It's just sitting there. Literally, I see it every day. Every time I go into a liquor store, it's sitting there and people aren't buying it up. And I genuinely, maybe I'm a little surprised, but like, it is as good as the Cellar Aged from this year, or in today's blind, it came out on top. I think maybe Maker's Mark knew something when they were like, hey, our whiskey is sort of the best at 6 to 7 years old. Let us experiment with the stave process. Let us add some layers to it, but this is where it shines. Yeah, going back to it, it's like raspberry even now, and just rich sweetness, great characteristics, and a pretty dense feeling in the mouth. Cellar Aged had that quality too, but it wasn't as strong throughout the entire experience. Again, it might be a case where the Cellar Aged, if you give it more time and you kind of spend time with the complexities, but in a straight up blind matchup, the brute force sweetness and great flavor of the Keepers just came through. And that answers our question. Take this however you want, but today for me, the $70 bottle kind of kicked the butt of the $175 bottle, which is crazy. Makes me feel a little bit sad that I've spent, the money on the Cellar Aged 3 years in a row. Makes me want to go buy a backup of the Keepers, because I keep seeing it on shelves, like I said. But let me know in the comments below. Have you tried all three of these? Have you tried any of them? What do you think? Have you done something like this, a blind? How do you think Cellar Aged stacks up compared to Maker's Mark's wood finishing series, or more just mid-tier releases? Because today, it got its butt whooped. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. While you're in the comments below, definitely hit that like button. That's what helps get the video out to the most people. And then if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Bourbon Hutch. Trying to reach 4,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. We're getting real close. I think we can reach that goal. And the new rule is If you had any fun or learned anything or enjoyed even a little bit of this video today, you gotta subscribe. I know I just made that rule up, but still, it's kind of fun. So join us for the journey and the rest of 2025 and beyond. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey. Don't sleep on that mid-tier makers price-wise, and cheers.